A father wrote to me, we'll call him John, and he said that his son, Lewis, was being bullied by some bigger and older boys at school, and he didn't know what to do about it. Bullying is exceptionally common. So it's a subject that everybody needs to be familiar with. You're very likely either the parent of a bully or somebody who's being bullied. Because when children don't feel happy, they take it out on the kids around them. That's what bullying is. Now, the first thing to note is that Lewis, the child, felt safe enough with his father to tell him what had been happening. Most parents don't know that their children are even being bullied. So the surveys that indicate the percentage of children who are being bullied are vastly understated. Because if you ask a kid, they're afraid to tell you the truth. They're afraid they're going to get in trouble. You ask a parent, the child hasn't told the parent, so the incidence is not known, but it's way bigger than people think. But Lewis felt safe enough to tell his father because John, his father, had been learning to love and teach Lewis. That's why it's called Love and Then Teach. So we love him and love him and love him and then we teach him some and then occasionally use consequences. And because Lewis felt loved by John, he came to him with a problem. When your child comes to you unsolicited with a problem, it's like winning the lottery. The majority of, especially boys, don't immediately share these personal experiences with parents because they feel like, well, if they're being bullied, then that means that they are weak. See the self-fulfilling condition? A child bullies them because, well, they probably are weak. And then because they're bullied, that proves that they're weak. And so they feel weak, then they act weak, then they're bullied more. Terrible cycle. So they don't talk about it because it makes them feel weak. They're ashamed that they can't handle it alone and need help, which is often one of the taunts of the bully. Oh, you need help with everything. So this is really hard for kids to talk about. And they're fearful that their parents won't understand their fears and pain. When children will almost never come to you and say, I'm being bullied. They won't say that. They'll describe how they're being treated badly. They're already embarrassed. It's already difficult. And we tend to just dismiss it. Well, just stand up to those kids. If they could, they already would have. That's a lot of reasons that I just described for somebody not to talk about how they were bullied, which is why it stays a secret. So we have to give them reasons to talk about it. Why? So that we can stop the bullying? Well, for sure, bullying does need to stop, but that's actually not the most important goal. Because if it were, we could accomplish that by simply putting every bully in jail or take them out back behind the jail and shooting them in the head. We'd stop bullying. Stopping bullying isn't the point. It's about loving and teaching John's son and knowing how to do that and knowing how to love and teach your son or daughter. Schools teach that there shouldn't be bullying. That only took them a few thousand years to catch on to. Really. When I was a kid, there was no discussion like this. There were no newspaper articles. There were no articles on the internet, primarily because there was no internet. But now it's all over the place. Cyberbullying, gotta stop bullying. I'm sure there's a movement that has a hashtag about bullying, but I just don't happen to know it. Posters declare at school that there should be no bullying. I mean, everybody knows this. Don't bully. It's like saying rotten apples are bad to eat. Don't eat fungus off your cheese. Everybody knows this. But who teaches kids what to do when they are bullied? Now, it turns out there are a few rare schools that do this, but they're very rare and virtually no parents. So Dad asked Lewis how he was bullied. And the list was not unusual. So listen to this. He was just pushed in the hall. He's walking along in the hall, where the lockers are, and the bigger kid just pushes him against the lockers. It makes a lot of noise. Everybody laughs. The child is rarely injured, and so we just tend to dismiss it. Except that, see, now we have a child who is just physically and emotionally humiliated. It made a loud noise against the lockers. The entire hallway full of people looked at him and laughed at him. And now he feels so tiny and wants to crawl into a gopher hole. That is the problem with bullying. It's not being pushed into a locker. Kids, as they get bigger, they become often clumsy, and because they don't know what to do with their increasing size, and they might stumble into a locker anyway. That's not the problem. It doesn't hurt them. It's the humiliation. It's when they're out on a ball field, instead of somebody kicking him the ball in either soccer, what the Europeans call football, American football, they throw the ball lightly, but where the kid can't see it, and hit the kid in the head. Now, does it ever knock him unconscious? A ball. That would be pretty rare, but it's the same public humiliation. You are a little piece of garbage. That's what the ball hitting the kid in the head says to everybody who sees it, and you deserve to be treated poorly. Oh boy, this just kills kids. It's been demonstrated, and we'll talk about it, or already did, in the parenting training, that at least 1 in 4 kids who are missing from school on a given day, who of course have excuses for going to a doctor's appointment, or they were sick, or blah, blah, whatever. At least 1 in 4 didn't go to school because they were terrified of going to school even one more day. They couldn't stand the thought because they're bullied. That's how bad it is. Children who are bullied are just made to feel horrible, often for the rest of their lives. Lewis continued, so being hit by a ball, pushed in the hall, shoved from behind, which often results in you hitting your face on the floor, laughed at by groups of kids as they walk by him at his locker. Sounds like a little thing. Nope, it's humiliating again. Teased in class. Another kid raises his hand and gets a wrong answer, and they ignore that kid. But for some reason, Lewis, there are a million reasons for a bully to pick out a kid. Because he looks shy, because he wears glasses, because he's from another country, because he has an accent, because he lisps, because he's too tall, too short, too fat, too whatever, anything. Bullies are just looking for a target. Other people don't get an answer, nothing happens. Lewis misses an answer, and the bully, usually the bully has a little team of people around him that kind of support him and elevate him to the position of local mafia don, because they don't want to get bullied. So they support him. So they all bully this kid. Lewis said he would get mimicked and mocked for many things that he'd say. So he gives an answer in class, and if it's the wrong answer, then the other kids walk around going, and mimicking his answer, quoting him, and trying to sound like him. He said that he was called by the other boys gay boy. Now, this may be confusing to some people, but at this point, and when I was a kid, it was common for boys to be called gay, not because they were homosexual, which is what gay means now, and it's not so much a homophobic slur in this case, as simply a phrase that the boys knew would bother Lewis. They weren't saying he was gay. They just knew it bothered him to be called gay. So they called him that. If it had bothered him to be called broccoli, they would have called him that. So I told Dad that these behaviors cannot be tolerated in any degree ever. Every parent needs to hear that. Bullying can't be tolerated ever, to any degree, none. You don't decrease bullying, you don't decrease the frequency of it. It has to disappear. Why not? Why can't it exist to lesser degrees, or a little? I mean, a little bullying's got to be good for you. No, because Lewis, like any child being bullied, then feels excluded and alone. Every bullied child will tell you that, which feels like being cast out of the only world that he knows. He feels lost and adrift. It's worth noting that, and we've talked about this before, 1 out of 4 kids missing school on any given day, it's because they feel bullied. Kids who are bullied feel worthless. Without being able to articulate this feeling, Lewis somehow feels like that if he were a genuinely worthwhile person, he's got nobody to talk to about this. Because he feels worthless, he has concluded that if he were genuinely worthwhile, he would not be taunted and demeaned. So the fact that kids make him feel worthless proves that he is. See? That may not be entirely logical to you. When people are afraid, they're not entirely logical. Third, people who are bullied feel small and helpless. No matter what he does, the bullying continues or it gets worse. It's the definition of helpless. The victim of a bully is helpless, or he wouldn't be picked on by the bully. Nobody likes feeling helpless and trapped. Nobody. You don't. Your children don't. Now, let's get specific about some bullying behaviors. You're going to walk away from here going, cool, I've got something I can do. I strongly emphasize that I'm not going to tell you exactly what to say or do in every circumstance. It would be a huge book, and you'd have to add to the book every day as new circumstances arose. The number of possible situations is uncountable, and the circumstances change from moment to moment in any given interaction. But I can talk about some specifics which illustrate the principles I'm going to teach, and some generalities that will help you and Lewis, I'm talking to John now, the father who wrote me, to prepare for the next time there is bullying. As I do these, I often tend to go back and forth between addressing the person who wrote me and you, everybody who's listening. And if you can't keep track of which one it is, just assume it's you. So let's imagine that Lewis, or your son or daughter, if you're listening or watching this, imagine that Lewis tells you that a boy at school, to use his example, called him a gay boy in some way. In other words, he publicly demeaned him, mocked him, humiliated him. There are so many ways for Lewis to respond. And as you go over some of the possibilities, one of the huge benefits of going over how to respond isn't the response. It's simply that Lewis realizes there are choices. Remember, one of the big effects of being bullied is to feel helpless. Now he's going to learn, you mean I have choices? There are things I can do. He won't feel helpless, nor worthless, because you're paying attention to him. Right now, he only has one choice. He feels bad about himself. That's it. That's kind of limited and, well, kind of needless. He feels worthless, helpless, and hopeless. Terrible combination. He feels trapped. That's all no good. So what are some ways he can respond? Now, not all of these will work. Sometimes all of them will work. Sometimes one of them will work. Remember, I'm just giving you examples. Bullies do things because they get something out of it. Well, all of us do. People don't smoke because they don't get any effect. People don't use drugs because they don't get any effect. They don't have sex because they don't get. We do things that give us some reward. Same with bullies. So Lewis walks into class before class starts, or he's out on the school ground and he puts earbuds in his ears. Now, I know some schools wouldn't allow that, but it's something to consider. And if you talk to the teacher or the principal ahead of time, they might consider it. It's just one of the choices. It's something that he might try. If a teacher won't allow it, then let the teacher say so. It's a way to indicate to the bully. When we were little, we didn't have earbuds. And what we would do when the bully spoke is this. And I discovered more times than not, the bully would go away because the bully wants to be heard. If you indicate that you can't hear him, then the bully goes away. You're saying, I'm not interested in what you're saying. Bullies only continue their behavior because they get something from it. Without a reward, they stop the behavior. The way we described it in the parenting training is if you no longer throw fish to a seal, they don't climb up on a box and clap their flippers together and balance a ball on the tip of their nose because you're not rewarding them. We have to stop rewarding the bully. That's one way. He could put earplugs in his ears. Foam earplugs are widely available, and they often come in bright colors like purple for the purpose of other people realizing that someone has earplugs in and therefore can't hear. It communicates the same message as earbuds. Again, you might have to check with the school to see if those are permissible. Another solution. Lewis practices hearing a variety of insults from you. He gives you the verbiage, and you be the bully, and you insult him. This practice helps take the sting out of such words and phrases. I once taught a group of people who came from different ethnicities, and I asked them to tell me what the different racial slurs were that they would hear and the slurs that they really, really hated. So I spent an entire class calling them those names, which I wouldn't recommend you do on your own unless you're in the position of being a teacher in a class. By the end of the class, they realized that they were being controlled by words that were ridiculous. They don't mean anything unless they allow them to. People have called me every manner of thing there is in my lifetime. And when I don't care, the word has no power. And that's what you're going to help Lewis see. If you call him something, if you call him gay boy and he goes, this is all about the foolishness of the bully, this isn't about me, and it doesn't say anything awful about me, he's going to quit caring. You explain to him that people are unkind like that only because they don't feel loved. And picking on him gives them a feeling of power. If he ignores them, it's no fun for them anymore, and they tend to stop, just like this class of ethnic people that I taught. There was one kid on the front row who I called a particularly offensive word. You wouldn't use it in public. You can't even use it in print, or you'll have 8 people come down on you with tons of bricks. And I just kept calling him the offensive word. And he finally started laughing. He said, "You freed me. You've saved me from that word." Now, the people in the class were very uncomfortable as I used this word. So was he. But he got over it because he could see it doesn't mean anything unless he makes it mean something. Unless he believes that he's bad because he's a whatever. Pick the word. Pick a racial slur. Pick a anything. Gay boy. So your son, Lewis, practices hearing the insults from you with a mindset that he simply doesn't care what other people say when they are empty and afraid. It turns into a game. In fact, there might be sometimes during the day that he makes a mistake and you look right at him and you say, "Gay boy." Really? If you've been practicing with him, he'll get to the point where he will laugh and he might call you some name in return. Victory. No kidding. Another thing you can do. You can help Lewis make light of the insult. Again, practicing with you at home. So when he is called a gay boy by you at home, and then you help him practice for doing this at school, he might say, as though he were saying it to the boy who were saying it to gay boy to him, "You sound like you're looking for something. Were you looking for a gay experience? Would you like to have one right here in school? You need to help him practice with the tone. Because if he says this right, everyone in the class will then laugh at the bully. Now, it is not my intent to make the bully feel bad, but the bully won't do it again. Bullies pick on the weak, just like groups of wolves go after the weak animal in the pack. They will follow a pack of buffalo for miles and miles because they know that a great big male 1,500-pound buffalo, they can't take them. But if they wait for the weak one, they can pull that one down. So we turn the weak one into a bull. That's what you're going to do for Lewis. He says, so were you looking for a gay experience here at school? I mean, is that something you want me to help you with? People will laugh at the bully. Or you sound jealous. This is to the bully. Are you telling everybody that you wish you were gay? Again, this isn't about being gay. It's about the term gay boy. That's going to stop the mocking. Bullies don't like being mocked in return. They don't like people having clever answers, and they tend to move off to easier prey, just like wolves do. Another possibility. Lewis describes clearly, confidently, and directly to the bully what the consequences will be if the bully continues with verbal insults, in this case, gay boy. Here are some examples. These are examples of Lewis speaking to the bully. Quote, "You can call me whatever you want, but the price will go up each time you do it." End quote. Now, that by itself won't stop the bullying, but boy, he'll have the bully's attention because the bully's been picking on Lewis because there's been no price. Now Lewis is telling him the price is going to go up, and he's going to be a little more cautious. This, of course, begs an explanation, which follows. If the bully continues, you teach Lewis how to escalate the consequences. So another thing Lewis might say is, I could talk to the teacher now, and then the principal, and then whoever it takes, including your parents, including the police. Your choice. Or you could stop now. Now, I can tell you, having watched this as a young boy in school many times, the bully will make light of that. Oh, yeah, run to the teacher, run to the principal. So help Lewis practice what to say. Lewis just says, you heard what I said. If you keep this up, the consequences will get worse. Your choice. They're looking for easy prey. And Lewis is simply announcing, I'm not the weak one in the herd anymore. Now, does that mean, the bully's going to go and find somebody else? Yes, and we're not directing the bully to go do that, but you're not the parent of everybody else. You're the parent of Lewis. Another thing he could say, you appear, this is especially effective if he says this to the bully in the company of other people. Bullies usually bully kids in the presence of other people so they can feel powerful. So Lewis says to the bully, you appear to be somebody who gets bullied at home, possibly beaten or yelled at or humiliated. So it seems unlikely that your parents would like to deal with your behaving badly at school. Talking to them is probably what's going to come next, and I don't think you're going to like that. End quote. That's what Lewis says to the boy. This can be very frightening to a bully, especially if Lewis knows that the bully likely is treated badly at home, which embarrasses him. Lewis needs to know there's a very high likelihood that this bully is being bullied. What he's doing is getting a sense of less helplessness because at home he does feel helpless and treated badly. Another thing Lewis could say to the bully. It turns out that, quote, recent legislation has established, and you're going to have to help Lewis do this because this is fancy language, but the fancier it is, the more frightening it is to the bully. It turns out that the laws, be one way you could say it, recent legislation, if he's older, laws have said that using homophobic slurs like gay boy is actually against the law. Specifically, it is a hate crime. If Lewis, all you got to do is look it up on Google. If he can name the actual statute, so if he says it's against statute 25.3 subparagraph B, that's just going to scare the bully to death. I've seen this done. It really works. So Lewis continues to the bully. If you'd like, we can go straight to the police and we can talk about you're violating that statute. There are very few bullies who will continue bullying past Lewis saying all that. I promise you, I was a boy. I was there, and I've helped parents do this. Bullies stop. They're looking for the easy prey and for fun. And if Lewis isn't fun and he isn't easy prey, it's going to stop. Now, what if a bully pushes or hits Lewis? Calling him gay boy is one thing. Pushing or hitting him is another thing. That changes everything. There's no talking then. Because I used to work in emergency rooms for 6 years. And I've seen kids who were simply pushed from behind and fell down and hit the corner of something and were lacerated, lost their vision, broke a leg, tore open a blood vessel in their throat, and died. When a big kid pushes a little kid, he has no idea how much stronger he is than the little kid. And it can kill them. And it has. I've been there in the emergency room and seen it. So he gets pushed, everything changes. Lewis has to get direct and utterly inflexible. Remember, you're going to either write this down or show it to him so that he's comfortable doing this. If he's shoved or hit or physically threatened, we do something immediately. Any such actions are called, in most legal jurisdictions, assault. If I did that to you as an adult, pushed you from behind and pushed you down, you would call the police and they would put pretty little bracelets on my wrists behind me and push me in the back of a squad car. Assault is a crime, and the school can be held liable for allowing such behavior. So you call the school and describe that you're going to call the police, the school is going to become infinitely more interested. So what might Lewis say on such an occasion when someone hits him or pushes him? Here are some just examples. One would be, quote, I don't like what you just did, pushing me. We're going to assume that he didn't push him hard enough to hurt him, but just pushed him into the lockers, for example. And you will never do it again. We're not having a discussion. You will never do it. You can, of course, do that, but the price is going to get higher and higher. In fact, if you do it one more time, I will go to the authorities or to the police, or may just choose to call the police from my cell phone right here and now. Bullies don't continue past, I'm going to call the police. Or he might say to him, you just committed a crime. And then again, he cites section 25 of the criminal code or whatever it is. And we'll call the police and we'll see what the penalties of that crime are. This requires great confidence on the part of Lewis. That's why you're going to be practicing this with him. We'll have to look the offender directly in the eye and speak with no hesitation. If need be, he can call the police. He can go to the school office and say, I want to call the police. If he goes to the school office and demands to call the police that he's been physically hit, it's actually illegal for the school to stop him. You need to tell Lewis all this stuff. It's going to stop if you teach Lewis what to do. That's what I'm telling you. You can stop this. When a parent tells me they have a child that's being repeatedly bullied, I'm going, well, then you need to learn how to stop it, because we can. The details, again, are not what matters. What matters is that Lewis doesn't feel trapped anymore and that he has choices here that will specifically decrease the chances of his being bullied. It will likely require a bunch of sessions between you and Lewis of role-playing and practice before Lewis gets to the place where he can respond in a strong and confident way. But wow, is it worth it? And you can teach him.